Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race. We're here to look at the Chinese Grand Prix and IndyCar returning to the Thermal Club, a points-paying race this season. I'm Ben Schneider, filling in for Joe Samaniego, and with me, Jess Ball from Just Games and Joshua Birch Motorsport, and Emily Sharp is with us as well. Before we get started, as always, I want to give a shout-out to our Patreon supporters. If I can find the graphic here, there we go. Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, thank you so much for continuing to support what we do here at the Grid Network. Your support goes a long way, and if you like what you see this afternoon, you want to consider joining them, you can visit the link in the description box below, or if you'd rather make a one-time contribution to us instead, you can visit the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below, or tip us through YouTube Super Chat or Super Thanks as well. But as always, the best thing you can do, just subscribe to the channel here, join us on our journey to 2,000 subscribers and beyond throughout the rest of the 2025 season. Now, let's start with the Chinese Grand Prix, and let's start by recapping the sprint race that we saw last night or this morning, or wherever you are, depending what time zone you're in. I know it's real rough for us here on the East Coast. We're going to have a 3 a.m. start for the race here, again, tonight or this morning, depending on how you're looking at it. But Lewis Hamilton took the checkered flag, a result that I think many probably weren't expecting after what Ferrari went through in Australia last week, but he took the sprint pole, led every lap. Nobody had anything for him. It's an exciting moment for him and the team, but of course, we all know the Grand Prix pays the big bucks, pays the most points. That's what is ahead of them in just a few hours' time. Hamilton only qualified 5th for that race. So, Emily, looking at how this weekend has gone for Lewis so far, you got to think momentum is on his side. Can he gain those 4 spots back and be on the top step of the podium in the main event this weekend?
Well, first of all, Ben, Jess, I will just say that time is on my side this weekend because I'm on the West Coast. So it's not too bad for me to be tuning into all of these races. But going back to Lewis Hamilton, my goodness, how exciting was it for him to be at the top of that sprint podium, both in qualifying and then he brought it home in the sprint. Of course, big story there was that he set a new track record only to be a few hours later. Oscar Piastri went and demolished that and set a new track record. But second race outing for Lewis and in his new Ferrari for Team 44. Very unexpected. Of course, he's been a race winner here at this track multiple times in previous years. Of course, last year he was 9th with Mercedes. So for me, it was a bit unexpected, but love to see that it seems like it's already starting to come together for Lewis and his new team. Leclerc was struggling a little bit more in qualifying and in the sprint. So perhaps this is a good indicator that a rhythm is starting to be found for Lewis and Ferrari, if the Ferrari vehicle is just not as strong this outing. But I mean, it's quite feasible. To your point, Ben, he's starting in 5th. This is a very demanding course in terms of grip and tire wear. And we've already seen that the tire whisperer is back in Shanghai. So it's certainly possible. I'm not ruling out at least a 3rd place finish from Lewis, but curious to hear your thoughts, Jess.
Well, I have to say, when I found out that Lewis Hamilton qualified on pole for the sprint race, I was absolutely delighted. Obviously, I know that my parents are big Lewis Hamilton fans, a bit more than I am, but I think Lewis is starting to find his rhythm a little bit. With the Australian Grand Prix last weekend, it was his first race in Ferrari, in a Ferrari power unit. He's been in Mercedes for almost all of his life, even in the McLaren days. So he had to get used to quite a few new things. And there was quite a few critics that were like, oh, hang on, Lewis is not getting used to his engineer. Well, it took Bono a long time to get used to his engineer. And it seemed like in the sprint race, I think they seem to be a little bit more in harmony. And I agree with Emily. His time management was absolutely incredible. He's done well in China in the past, which is really, really great to see. But in the qualifying session we saw this morning on my side, it was kind of the opposite. McLaren changed their setup for qualifying because they felt that they didn't do well in the sprint race, and it worked out in their favour. Ferrari changed the setup for the qualifying, just a few small tweaks here and there. And all it took was a small tweak, and Lewis felt the car was on a knife edge. I think it's going to be quite a bit trickier for Lewis Hamilton to keep that momentum because the car has changed so much. And he even said he wanted a car that was balanced. The car had a different balance around China. And he thought that the high speed was overbalanced. So I think it's going to be quite difficult, but with him being a little bit more in harmony with his engineer, I won't be surprised that if he reaches the podium this weekend in China.
Well, speaking of McLaren, Lando Norris had a very poor sprint race, only a sixth place starting grid spot, and nearly missed scoring points. He did get that final point for coming home in eighth place, but Max Verstappen, meanwhile, finished third, so he closes that championship gap. Of course, it is still very early, but he's only 2 points behind Lando heading into the feature race, I guess you could say today. Lando starting third, Max is fourth. Just now that Lando is the one Max is chasing, does that change Lando's mentality? Does that put more pressure on him that could be a disadvantage?
Well, we all know Max Verstappen is a really capable driver, and to be honest, Red Bull is not the best car out there. And we'll talk about Liam Lawson, I think, a little bit later on. But I think we're starting to realise that no matter what car you throw at Max Verstappen, Max delivers, and that's really going to worry Lando Norris. Lando Norris really made a mistake in the sprint race. He dropped a few positions, and we know in China, Lando was not the best last year with his starts in the wet conditions. Lucky it was dry. So Lando really has to get his starts better. I know Lando and Max had a interesting rivalry last season, and both of them weren't very used to it. So I think with one season under his belt as being a championship contender, he will probably have more pressure to deliver because he just missed out last season. He wants to win the title this season. If he doesn't, it's going to be a bit worrying heading into 2026. But I think it's not going to disadvantage Norris that much. They are good friends. They've been rivals last year as well. But if Lando could see that Max is delivering week on week, even with a not too decent car, that's going to strongly suggest that Lando and McLaren need to pull a very good car each and every weekend, because Max, I think, is becoming one of the all-time greats, like Lewis Hamilton, like Fernando Alonso, that may not have a good car beneath them, but still deliver great results week after week. So Lando needs to perform this weekend, but luckily they changed their setup this week. In qualifying, and it seemed to work wonders for the McLaren. So maybe the setup is definitely the thing they need, and they've got to work on their tyre management, like we saw with Lewis Hamilton in the sprint race.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jess. Some would say three things in life are inevitable: death, taxes, and Max Verstappen in whatever car he's in. I agree. It's fairly early on in the season. With that being said, I do think that this is a potential a crook in the road for Lando Norris. I'm really curious to see how they are going to respond in this Grand Prix. Really not a great outing for him in the sprint race. He barely got points secured after kind of trailing in ninth throughout the entire race there. I'm really curious to see what the takeaway is from the Grand Prix. If he's able to make up some spaces closer to the front, I think that's a pretty positive outing for him, considering that it seems like McLaren just cannot get the right setup for him, versus Oscar, who had a great finish so far. He's finishing on pole, but again, Lando had that aborted lap in qualifying, so who knows what could have been. Point I'm trying to make is, if he has a bad takeaway from this weekend, does that start to kind of play into the mental games? We heard it several times last season that he wasn't prepared. He wasn't ready to be in this championship fight with Max. So it seems like he is coming into this season mentally prepared for that. However, if he has a bad weekend, does that start to get into your head that no matter what car Max is in, he is going to be charging and still putting himself at the front of the field? Does that start to get into Lando's head, and will that affect him the rest of the season? I know we're going to talk about papaya rules in our conversation today, but I think that is something that may have to be more aggressively enforced as well. So again, early on in the season to really say this is a disadvantage to be the one that's being chased this season. It seems that he's ready for it, but anything can change if you have an off weekend.
All right, we'll move on to Lando's teammate here in the Papaya Rules conversation in just a moment. First, I want to welcome Adam. Good to see you in the chat. Rest in peace, Eddie Jordan. What an incredible man. Gave Michael Schumacher his first ever drive in F1 of a 1991 Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. Yes, all of us here at Grid Network certainly sending our best to his friends and family. I think this is our first Grid Live weekend show since we got the news this week, but he had passed away. So very sad news indeed. And we're thinking of everybody in the F1 paddock. We move on now to Oscar Piastri. He took second in the sprint and put his McLaren on pole with George Russell alongside him on the front row. Directly behind Piastri on the grid will be his McLaren teammate, Lando Norris. So, Emily, you mentioned it, Papaya rules. Does that come into effect to ensure McLaren has an organized, clean start between their two drivers and brings both cars home in one piece?
Well, if you were asking this question to Zach Brown, Ben, he would say that there's no papaya rules this season. But thankfully, you're asking me, so you get my opinion on the matter. I think, listen, I've been telling this to anyone I could talk their ear off. I've said it a few times here on Grid Network. McLaren being the fun team, everyone's going to have a chance. It's for the team, kind of taking that Ferrari mentality of like, both drivers are number one. We're the fun team. We're not the aggressive Red Bull team. That's over. If, they made great progress, obviously, with their car last season and took home the Constructors Championship. But if they want to have a solid campaign, unrockable for Lando Norris to be world champion, papaya rules have to happen, and tough decisions and feelings need to get hurt to enforce that to happen. I think you have to prioritize Lando. Are we going to see it as aggressive as some, Checo or Valtteri Bottas being sacrificed in the name of the number one driver? I think that's too soon to tell, but I would not discourage that, which is potentially very controversial opinion. I think the priority has to be Lando. It seems like that is who McLaren has said, this is our more seasoned driver. He's been here longer. He's been in the series longer. That's who we're going to prioritize for this campaign. We've seen these scraps happen before between Lando and Oscar. Of course, Lando starting much further back than Oscar is on pole. So it's going to be interesting to see how many places Lando can pick up here. And I'm a firm believer of papaya rules. It needs to happen this season. The fun McLaren seasons are gone, and tough decisions need to start being made. And I did want to just end it on a more fun note that they shared earlier in the broadcast that Bruce McLaren and Lando are now tied with the most podiums. So maybe we'll get a Lando record-breaking podium finish for the McLaren team this weekend. So.
Oh, that's a really good milestone, I think, for Lando Norris, hopefully to achieve. But papaya rules, that's always an interesting debate for me. The thing that I don't want to happen is team orders. I don't want team orders to happen this early on in the season, because we know how quick Oscar Piastri has been this weekend. He's been on fire. He's been good in the sprint, even with a setup that hasn't been to his liking, but he's been able to learn to adapt it. But in the main race, he's outshone Lando Norris by quite a bit, and he was able to put the pressure on him a little bit. So I think they should be allowed to race, but I agree with Emily to some extent that they can't take each other out or race hard, because otherwise they're going to lose so much time to Max Verstappen. But if, like, one of their engineers saying, well, you got to let your teammate by, I think that just won't be acceptable this early on in the season. If it was like halfway through the season, sure, but if like Oscar has to let Lando through, I just don't think Oscar would go by very well. And Oscar really has to prove himself to make sure he doesn't get that team orders. But we know with teammates, you are free to race, but if you do take each other out, there's going to be some stern words. So I can see why McLaren have put the papaya rules in to make sure that they don't have a little bit of a raft between the two drivers.
Yeah, I think we saw times towards the end of last year when Lando was barely hanging on to a championship fight that papaya rules turned into papaya fools. They didn't know how to properly implement their team orders there, and it ultimately cost them in the championship. So on the driver's side of things, of course, obviously they won the constructors over Ferrari in the last race at Abu Dhabi. But this year, I think they certainly have a car that's capable of giving Lando the opportunity to fight for a driver's championship, and maybe even Oscar as well. And if they get to that point where they have a dominant enough car, then we'll obviously be free to see them race late into the year. But I think at this point in the season, especially, you kind of have to let Lando assert himself as the potential number one. I would hope Oscar would give him a little bit more grace than he would a Ferrari or Max's Red Bull or Mercedes in a situation like that. But I would still hope that they'd be free to race nonetheless. We'll move on now to the Red Bull family of teams here. We'll start with the Racing Bulls, RB, V-Carb, AlphaTauri, Toro Rosso, whatever they're called these days. They're off to another fast start. Both of their drivers in the top 10 to start the race. Isaac Hadjar out-qualified Yuki Tsunoda. That pair will start 7th and 9th, respectively. Of course, Hadjar gained a lot of sympathy throughout the F1 fan base and the F1 paddock over what happened to him on the Formation Lab crash last weekend in Australia from basically everybody, I think, not named Helmut Marko. So, Jess, could we see a double points day for this team that has been showing pace in qualifying, but of course missed out on their points in Australia?
Well, Yuki Tsunoda in Australia performed absolutely fantastic. If I was to give a driver of the day, one of them will be Yuki Tsunoda. He had no fault at all in that race, and I think it was the team's fault that he didn't score points. And he's definitely shown that he can keep up this consistent form in China with a really good result in the sprint and holding off Kimi Antonelli in a considerably faster car. And we saw that Isaac Hadjar was able to make some moves in the sprint race as well, considering he had hardly any racing experience and still managing to just miss out on the top 10 finish, which I have to say is incredible. I think, on due respect, the Racing Bulls, I think, I've got to admit, is a better car than the Red Bulls right now. If you take Max Verstappen out the equation, I think the Red Bulls are a midfield team. And I hate to admit it, the Red Bulls have really got to step it up if they don't want to see their sister team go out on the top as well. And Tsunoda really praised the car, and he even said that if he didn't make that mistake, he would have out-qualified his teammate. But he was still happy with ninth. He feels like he can gain quite a few positions. He gained quite a few positions in the sprint as well, so it's not over for him. Hadjar, with only his second race, I think getting into Q3 for the first time, I think everyone must have been very happy for him. And that's definitely showing that the Racing Bull team has made the right decision in hiring a young talent. Of course, just missing out on the F2 title by quite some margin due to Mechachrome engines. We don't want to talk about that too much, but it's already encouraging to see Hadjar doing very well consistently in qualifying and definitely showing that they both have the car within them. It's not just Yuki Tsunoda outperforming Hadjar. They're both near each other on the grid for tomorrow, and that just shows that they are adapting well to this car. And I think Racing Bulls could challenge for maybe even surprise podium in the future as well. But I to answer your question, I think as long as Hadjar can keep his cool on the radio, I definitely think we could see double points. And I think Yuki Tsunoda can claim quite a few positions this weekend as well. I think he can now probably be in the top 5 due to his pace he's shown in the sprint.
So many points that I agree with you, Jess. I was going to start my piece of this saying another season where Yuki Tsunoda is in the top 2 of being the Red Bull drivers. But in a fair point, their Racing Bulls car is quite strong. I think it's obviously complementing both drivers' styles, and Isaac Hadjar is, to your point, just really acclimating well to his new opportunity here in a brand new series. Obviously, so happy for him that he's able to get out and do what he wanted to do last weekend. And I mean, both drivers had a really disappointing, obviously Hadjar had a very devastating end to his opening season weekend. Yuki Tsunoda too, that was just a huge missed opportunity to put points on the table. And I agree. I think it's totally in the realm of seeing a Yuki Tsunoda top 5 this weekend. Potentially both drivers finish in the top 10. This is going to be a team to watch throughout the entire season for the best of the rest conversation that we have here every year. I think there was a lot of momentum going forward for the Williams team with all of this buzz and excitement around Carlos Sainz that potentially the Racing Bulls have been overlooked. So certainly a team to watch as we are looking at, that 4th, that 5th place team. Who knows what's going to be happening with Aston Martin throughout the season. So Not much more to add, but I think this could be a great outing for both drivers this weekend.
Yeah, when was the last time you were able to say that the sister team or junior team at Red Bull family of programs had the better car over the senior team? I guess you have to go back to 2008 maybe when Sebastian Vettel won that race in Italy, Monza. That would be I guess I'm just pulling the standings up here. They finished sixth that year in the constructors. Red Bull was seventh. Of course, Red Bull then had Vettel move up to the senior team in 2009, and the rest is kind of history from there. But it's been a long time since the cars have at least been this close. Obviously, we all know that car is tailored for Max Verstappen's driving style, and that leads us into our next talking point here. You sound like a broken record. It's been the same story no matter who's been in that second seat, all the way back to Pierre Gasly and then Alex Albon. Sergio Perez, although he did win a handful of races, really fell off the back end of 2023 and then all throughout 2024. And now we're seeing it with Liam Lawson. He's starting 20th. Once again, the same result from the qualifying for the sprint race. He did make his way up to 14th in the sprint, so he was able to gain a few spots there, but he also qualified 18th in Australia, so he has not been able to unlock the same pace that Max Verstappen has out of that Red Bull car. And we're already hearing the rumors swirling. Yuki Tsunoda says he's ready. I like what Nicole said earlier this week on these programs here. I don't know if Yuki Tsunoda wants that Red Bull seat, given the curse that seems to be on that second driver at this point. He might be better off just staying in the RB or a Racing Bulls car. Emily, considering what we've seen so far, do you want to still give Liam Lawson a pass? Do you think he needs more time, given that it's his first full season? Or with how ruthless Red Bull tend to be, are his days starting to look like they might be numbered? How concerned are you about his status as a second driver?
I mean, I feel like this could be a whole other hour conversation, just kind of breaking down the expectations, the pressure, the curse of that second seat, and the Liam Lawson of it all. And how to respond to this question, because if this question would have been pondered, 2-3 years ago, this would have been a no-brainer. This would have been the Red Bull that we're all accustomed to knowing, of being that aggressive, being, next talent, and if you're not performing, you're out. But the Checo elongated performance opportunity that he received really kind of changed my perception of Red Bull, and I don't know what to expect. My own personal opinion, again, I'm going to be the aggressive one for 9:24 a.m. my time in the morning, but it seems like Lawson is certainly struggling, starting in 20th and crashing out in his first race last weekend. And then, to your point, good for him to pick up some spots in the sprint race, but this is a disaster. This is not what they hired Liam Lawson to be doing. I mean, they're going to give him some grace. This is his first full-time season in F1. This is the first time in really, one of these top four cars in theory, versus last season when he was in, the RB. But this is a disaster. This is, I think, beyond what anybody would have been expecting, what giving grace would look like, to be starting at the very back of the field. Obviously, I have no way. I'm not a team principal. I'm not Helmut Marko, who's making any type of decisions at Red Bull, but they have to be thinking about constructors and wanting to win that back. And if I was Red Bull, any signs of this going south, I would just start cutting my losses and going, we have to change things up. We cannot do what we did last year with give Checo so many opportunities to turn things around, only for it to be lost to McLaren. So to me, I think Liam Lawson has to have the drive of his life between now and his next outing. Otherwise, I think his name is on the table.
I think we've seen in Red Bull in the past how cursed the second driver seat is, because Albon only took until the end of his Red Bull career to get into a position where he was fighting for podiums. Perez had a strong start to every season and then has gone downhill a little bit, whereas Lawson, in his start to Red Bull, he hasn't been delivering. And it's a bit of a shame, because we saw in the Racing Bulls, he's been consistently delivering. He impressed last year. That's why Christian Horner was very brave and decided to promote Liam Lawson to the Racing Bull seat. But as Emily was saying, he was struggling. But I'm starting to think quite widely here. I'm looking at the onboards, and you could tell that Lawson was struggling. The Red Bull was really, really hard to handle. And we know that Max Verstappen preferences with the car. Maybe the car is suited to him. So do you think I think Red Bull's second car, I think, it's just a curse to begin with. If I was Yuki Tsunoda, I wouldn't want to go into Red Bull. I would be like, no thanks, I'll stay in Racing Bulls. I don't want him to go to Red Bull because I think he's going to get the same ridicule. So I gave Lawson the chance last week. I did. I wanted to give him another second chance, to be honest. But I think all it's going to take is Max Verstappen to leave Red Bull for Red Bull to realise, actually, it is the driver that's performing well, and maybe whoever we put in that car, excluding Verstappen, is not going to deliver, and then they need to fix the car. But we don't know. I really do hope Liam Lawson proves the critics wrong, Ben.
Yeah, well, and again, just thinking back to this team's history, you can even go back a little bit further. Daniel Kvyat outscored Daniel Ricciardo in 2015, 95 points to 92. 4 races into the very next year, one of which he had a podium at China. He had one bad race, his home Grand Prix in Russia, and of course, it was a little bit different back then because it was Max Verstappen waiting in the wings for the senior seat at Red Bull. But they were not afraid to make that switch even at that point in the season. So again, the culture over at Red Bull, very ruthless. And like you mentioned, Emily, it was kind of very surprising that they gave Checo Perez all the time to finish out the 2024 season. And of course, that was a little complicated because he had signed that contract extension, which I think was the most surprising piece of news of all that come out of that situation last year. Obviously, things changed as Checo's performance continued to dip. Let's catch up on the chat here a little bit. And friend Adam says, if I'm Red Bull, give Liam Lawson 1 season. If he doesn't improve, find another driver. I don't know if he's going to make it 1 full season here. If he keeps qualifying in 20th place, I think, again, to Emily's point, they have to consider making a change. So, sorry, I didn't know, Emily, if you want to follow up on that.
Yeah, I mean, for any athlete stepping into like the premier level of your sport, yes, like you should be able to have like a full season. We talked about it here, Ben and I, on the Women in Motorsports program about Jamie Chadwick in IndyCar and like Indy Lights, excuse me, and giving her the grace and a full season to get things under her before we start having these, really critical conversations. But it is just the reality that this is a business. It's millions of dollars on the line. I mean, I don't have the stats pulled up in front of me, but the difference between having a number 1 place in the Constructors Championship and the 3rd place, which is where Red Bull finished last year, that's millions of dollars. And it's just, I would also, I'm rooting for Liam Lawson. This is an incredible opportunity for him. He was, to Jess's point, chosen for having incredible consistency between his, filling in phase for Daniel Ricciardo in the 2023 season and then taking over the seat for the remainder of last season. So he was chosen for a reason. He has great instincts, quick twitches, and is, someone that we should be watching. But that second seat is so critical. And we saw last year that Max cannot win the Constructors Championship on his own. So I don't feel like we're going to get a full season of Liam Lawson. I hope he turns things around, and we do. But if this is what we're seeing every weekend, to me, I think the only way that we see that Liam Lawson keeps his seat is that he's every couple of weekends, getting knocked out in Q2. But if he's consistently out in Q3, I don't think we're even going to make it to halfway point.
You mean out in Q1, I'm assuming?
Oh, yes.
Not,
oh, my goodness.
Yeah, if he's not making it to Q3.
Yeah,
I got you.
If he's in Q3, like, sign him up for 5 years, baby. That's probably the best result that we've seen.
Yeah, well, and another one of our regulars, Day in My Life, suggesting, to your point, Emily, as well, you can't win the Constructors with just 1 driver when you don't have a dominant car like they had in 22 and 23. Red Bull already lost the Constructors in my mind. I think most of us probably would agree with that, and I don't think very many people are picking them to win the Constructors with how things are currently going with that second seat. But he also asked the follow-up question, do you know if Yuki wants to be in Red Bull? I would not want it. I think a lot of people might not want it, but This is an article from ESPN. Lawrence Edmondson put this out at 10:07 this morning Eastern time. So this is a fairly new thing that went to press. Asked if he would be happy to take on the challenge of driving the Red Bull, Tsunoda said, "Yeah, why not? Always." When a follow-up question suggested a switch in Japan, that's the very next race and Yuki's home race, he added, "In Japan? Yeah, 100%. I mean, the car is faster." After answering the question, Tsunoda was whisked away by a Racing Bull's PR person.
Oh,
So perhaps some damage control coming from the PR people over.
I think I heard of it. I think I heard of a suggestion at one point. If Yuki was to perform badly in Japan, if he was to go into the Red Bull seat, then would that strongly suggest that it is a second driver curse rather than the driver? We don't know. We won't know until if Yuki Tsunoda steps into the Red Bull car ban.
Yeah, that would be wild, though, if it happens that quickly. 2 races in. I know it's Yuki's home race.
But I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but what is a bad performance? If he just finishes in P12 compared to Lawson, who's qualifying in P20, P18, is that perception of like, he's making improvements already? Like we could see a better outcome from Yuki Tsunoda.
He's got to be near his teammate, Max Verstappen. He's got to be near his teammate, even if it's like a few places behind him. As long as he's not that far off Max Verstappen in terms of positions, that is a sign of things to come. But we won't know.
Yeah, we won't.
Yeah. I think he needs to be 8th. Whoever's in that second seat, I think we talked for years about the big 3, and now McLaren have had their resurgence. I think now it's the big 4. I think you have, Kevin Magnussen always used to say it's Formula 1.5, right? The Haas's and Williamses and other teams of the world fighting to be the best of the rest. I think that if you're in 8th place, you're the weakest of the top 4 teams, but you're still clear of the rest of the midfield. I think at this point, Red Bull will take that with what they've had to go through the last year and a half or so. I don't think 20th is acceptable, and to be quite frank, I don't know if 12th is acceptable either. I think that I don't know that anybody within reason is expecting. Like, of course, Max Verstappen is a world-class talent and an all-time great. They don't need to match Max's pace, especially, again, knowing that car is really tailor-made for him. But they do still have to be bringing home a sizable amount of points and help Red Bull in this constructors fight. Because, again, Red Bull probably should have been in that constructors fight last year, especially with how strong of a start Max got off to. But by the end of it, excuse me, even though Max had already clinched for drivers, it was a battle between 2 completely different teams that went all the way down to the checkered flag at Abu Dhabi. So it's a very complicated situation over there right now, but I think Red Bull's going to have some tough decisions to make, assuming that Lawson doesn't pull out a miracle and really gain a lot of those spots back in the Chinese Grand Prix. All right, one more comment here from Denver, and then we'll move on. Could there be an F1 Sprint World Championship in the future? I certainly hope not. I wouldn't like to see. I've not been a fan of these sprint races. I don't mind them so much in the lower categories like Formula 2, Formula 3. I understand the formats are a little bit different there, but I think that the fan reaction when they first were introduced was not that great, and I'm not personally a huge fan of seeing them continue to expand how many weekends we see them. I like just having. I think 24 races is even a little bit much, to be honest with you. I'd like to see the calendar back down to 2021 max again, but I don't know. Maybe I'm not the best person to answer this because I'm not a fan of having a format that changes from week to week. Some weeks we do this, some weeks we don't. So I don't know if Emily or Jess, if you have any thoughts on that, and then we can move on to IndyCar.
Just
sorry, Emily. I think the sprint format that we have now is a lot better than previous sprint formats, but I have to agree that if they want to do a sprint, they should do it for the entirety of the season, not just in just one sprint, just a few, like 6 weekends, because there's going to be a few new F1 fans that are going to be so confused, saying, oh, they don't get 4 points for this. And but I think at least the one good thing about this weekend that the order is shaken up in the sprint race, and then in qualifying we're seeing like different teams get into Q3. They were allowed to change their setup. I know when we started the sprint format, you weren't allowed to change your setup until after qualifying, and you can't even change for the sprint or even a race. So I think I like it that they've got 2-part formats for different things, but I think if they were to do a sprint, they should do it at all races or none at all. I don't know what you think, Emily.
Yeah, I'm aligned with you on that. Wow, what a creative thought, because having a sprint world championship never once ever entered my realm of consideration. So quite an interesting concept. I'm kind of in between both Jess and Ben. I'm not a huge fan of sprint races. Oscar Piastri certainly is. He's like one of the best record holders so far since we've started offering them in F1. But I think it's a different format. It's better than a few years ago when it was first introduced. But it's just, I agree. There's a lot of races already on the schedule. I mean, again, to look at the business side of things, perhaps it's a ticket seller and it's going to stick around because it gets people to come on those non-race days and to commit to 3-day tickets. But I'm indifferent to them. I don't love them. It's nice to break up practices with having a sprint race in lieu of them, but I don't think we have enough to have a world championship. But I don't know, maybe McLaren might be trying to campaign for one, since Oscar's kind of the sprint race GOAT so far.
Emily, you and I were just talking about this on Women in Motorsports last night on the NASCAR side of things with Catherine Legg and NASCAR drivers coming out and saying we don't have enough practice. Can you imagine if we said, okay, and I get what Jess is saying about we want consistency, either have them at no races at all or have the same format every weekend, but imagine how much practice time you would lose over the course of the season if you had sprints at every race, and how much that would affect
especially for rookies.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yes.
And I can't. Can you imagine David Croft saying it's lights out and away we go 48 times a year if we keep these 24 race calendars?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and for the drivers to go through. I mean, I know the sprints are a lot shorter, obviously, but just the mentality getting ready to launch off the grid is
damage limitation for sprints sometimes as well. So they may not be
yes.
performing at their potential.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see drivers race like Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton into their 40s. If we're doing 24 races a year with 24 sprints, I think you're going to start. I don't know how many drivers are going to make it into their 30s before they just get completely burned out from the stress of the schedule like that.
Even like the cost of it all. I mean, the drivers are going full out in races where they may be a bit more cautious in practice. And again, the Williams poor mechanics. Can you imagine if we had 48 races of them going full out and then trying to repair a car with enough time for the Grand Prix? So it certainly an interesting thought. Never say never. That the sport is always going to have to be evolving to maintain viewership and to pique people's interest. So never say never, but certainly a lot of things to consider before employing something like that.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I would like. I would like a sprint race at Abu Dhabi with the reserve drivers. Like bring out the third driver for every team.
It was talked about. Yeah, it was talked about, but it got cancelled.
Yeah, a 10-car sprint race was just every team's reserve. I think that would be fun to watch at the season finale, or maybe after the finale when testing starts. Something like that would be a neat idea. But in terms of like an official championship season-long thing, I don't think that would be sustainable personally. So we'll leave it there. Sure, there's going to be a lot of continued discussion around the sprint format as the season goes on. But in the meantime, we have an IndyCar race to look at. Thermal Club hosting a points-paying race for the first time. And Jess, I'll hand it over to you to lead this segment.
Yes, it will be the second round of the NTT INDYCAR Series, and the Thermal Club was a non-points paying race last year, but this time people are going to be fighting for points. And the only thing that has remained different is but the fastest in practice is, as usual, Alex Palou. He won the first race in at St. Petersburg last time out, with Scott Dixon and Joseph Newgarden followed directly behind him. And if you want to find out what goes on in the second practice, it's at 1 p.m. Eastern today, not far after this broadcast ending. And then we got qualifying at 5 p.m. Eastern if you want to check out all the action. Now, qualifying is going to be a bit different compared to St. Petersburg and what we see usually. We had 2 groups in St. Petersburg. Now we've got all 27 cars on track at the same time. And Emily, I'm going to start with you. How important is qualifying, considering there's going to be everyone out on track and not just either 12 or 6 cars with the Fast 6, for example?
Well, Thermal continues to want to push the limits and kind of have really, again, word of the day, potentially creative ways of organizing their race structure. Of course, last year, and the reason why I'm saying that last year, the way that it was handled, to remind all of our viewers, is they were broken up into mini heats. So you were not getting all of the drivers out at the same time, including up until the final race where we had, the all-stars of that, $1 million challenge. So I was under the impression that was being done, one, just to maximize the driver's performance in these low grip turns, and not a traditional racing track. It's historically been used for testing, and then obviously the $1 million challenge last year. So to have 27 drivers out on the course at the same time is kind of, I don't even know what the right word is. I don't want to say scary, because these drivers, their brains are different, but oh my goodness, a good qualifying spot is going to be everything, to answer your question, Jess. Expecting to see Alex Palou up in front, expecting to see the usuals up there as well between Penske. I think we'll have Arrow McLaren in the mix, obviously, Ganassi, with Scott Dixon. He's just like Max Verstappen, an inevitable being. But I do just want to remind from last year, some of our top performers were Felix Rosenquist. Scotty Mack was also in the hunt last year. He ended up taking second in the $1 million challenge. And again, I don't think we'll necessarily see it this year, because it is for points and it's not a glorified testing session for these drivers. But Colton Herta had a really unique approach to his race strategy, where he was really trying to maintain his tires throughout his heats, and then just picked drivers off at the very final laps to make up some places. But expect to see those drivers in the hunt. To your point, more practice coming, qualifying later today. But oh my goodness, this is about to be unhinged, having 27 drivers on that track at the same time today.
Yeah, I don't hold me to this. I've just pulled up the qualifying procedures on IndyCar's website. I don't see anything out of the ordinary for thermal. So I know Joe put this script together. Obviously, he's on break this week. I think he was talking about having 27 drivers on track for the race, because, of course, last year was an all-star race and we had drivers advancing to the final. But I think still to the point that Emily, you were making, qualifying still is going to be more important regardless of the format this weekend, because, it is the first time we're seeing a full field's worth of cars competing for points in a race that actually impacts the result of the championship here. So it's going to be very interesting to watch. And yeah, I mean, qualifying is always more important whenever you come to a road or street circuit. So I know all the teams and drivers are certainly going to be, putting their full focus on this qualifying session here later this evening. And we'll just have to wait and see who comes out on top. I think we're going to talk about that here a little bit later. But we have, obviously a lot like Formula One, kind of your big four, McLaren, Penske, Ganassi, and Andretti. But it'll be interesting to see if some of those smaller midfield teams, so to speak, can work their way up and disrupt that order a little bit.
Maybe I should have checked the format before we did this pre-live show. But yeah, I think in a way, if there was 27 cars on track, I think it would have been a lot of chaos. So thank goodness.
You will see that in the race, to be clear. We'll have all 27 out there for the race.
We'll have it in the race. But in qualifying, where the track is so important, if there was all 27 cars, it will just be traffic nonsense, not gonna lie. And I didn't like the heats formats last year. It was not good. So it's good that they're improving the format a little bit going into Thermal this weekend as well. And with it last year being a non-point of event, the tickets were geared towards a different crowd. A few different fans were there. It is a private venue, the Thermal Club in Palm Springs, which meant that in IndyCar, the tickets can be quite expensive, and it's not made to hold public events like IndyCar. So it's very brave for them to hold such events like this where points are on offer. And last year, as a non-points event, we talked about it in the Grid Network, and I talked about it a few times on JB Motorsports. It did not capture the best attention from fans and also journalists either, and it was just not very good at all. But now it's going to be a points-paying race, Ben. Now, maybe is it going to be drawing a positive following as an event for fans wanting to attend Thermal?
I doubt it. I don't know. I sit back and I think as a fan myself, I've been hearing Roger Penske for years, literally saying, "We hear you. We want more ovals ourselves. We're working on getting more ovals onto the schedule." And yes, they brought back Nashville Super Speedway after the street circuit deal fell apart. And yes, Milwaukee's back, and we appreciate those things. But we also lost Texas Motor Speedway, and what are they replacing it with next year in that market? I don't know. This just it feels like, I mean, I understand what they were trying to do, trying to emulate, what NASCAR has with their All-Star event at a popular venue in North Wilkesboro, bringing that track back and everything. But I think to do it at a private venue, a club essentially, like you were saying, Jess, I don't know. I think it was a turnoff. I know our friend Alex Anderson from the Gay Racing Podcast, who's not with us anymore, but he said that when he was with our team last year, just telling us in our group chat and saying he really wanted nothing to do with this race because it just felt like it was for the rich and famous and nobody else, and kind of like Formula One feels to a lot of fans. I think inaccessible in that regard. So, although I have to say I'm interested to see what the podium is going to look like last year, because the podium down at K1 I think is more upscale than what we saw for a $1 million all-star event last year. I mean, that was a pretty pathetic podium setting. So I hope that they've at least improved upon that here for 2025. But in terms of making a difference for the fans here, I mean, yes, there is more importance to the full season conversation. It's not just for prize money. Now you're racing still for a championship. So I'm sure that will bring some additional fan interest. I think some fans last year felt that they could tune out of that race because it didn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things besides the prize money and bragging rights. But in terms of getting fans to attend it or fans to view it as like the Long Beach Grand Prix, perhaps one of the most prestigious road or street circuit races on the calendar, I don't know if this does much to move that needle.
Yeah, and I did some research because this Thermal Club is in my backyard, if you will. I'm here in Southern California, and again, to Ben's point, like, who is this race for? Like, who's their target audience? I was also going to agree. This feels very inaccessible. I don't remember what the starting price of the tickets were last year. I tried to look it up, but I did find the information of what they discounted it to, which was $500 when they were having trouble selling tickets. And that's what the starting price for a general admission is for this year, or for this weekend rather. Just to like give some insight, I did like a little FBI search. The people that are living in this community are paying upwards of $200,000 just for a villa, plus the homeowners association, up to $10 million for a private home. So this is a very affluent community. I think they were thinking all of Southern California was going to be able to afford $500 plus tickets to be able to come out. I was seeing on the interwebs that a lot of comments were saying if they're going to spend this type of money, they are going to go to a Long Beach Grand Prix where it has the prestige, the history, the iconic views associated with it. I do agree. I think it's certainly a plus that we're now making this a points chase, and it's not a glorified test session or prize money, which is just, again, a whole kind of confusing narrative of we're going to give away $500,000 for an extremely expensive race to attend. very odd. I get it with Ben. I get what they were trying to emulate. But I think we will continue to see this as a testing location for the IndyCar drivers. They all have very positive experiences and reviews to come and test their preseason cars out here. But Monday, I'm going to be logging in and see what I can find about attendance and viewership of this to indicate if we're going to continue having this discussion. It's cool to have another race here in California, but man, devastated that Auto Club Speedway got demolished and we lost out on that oval, because that was a great one to attend and watch. So again, I agree. I wish we would have more ovals, but yeah, we'll just have to wait and see how this goes. But glad to see it's at least for points now.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up real quick. I would pay $500 for like a VIP experience at the Indianapolis 500. I'm not going to pay $500 for a road or street circuit this early in the season.
To stand.
To
stand.
I mean, that's So
for general admission.
Yes.
If
you can afford it, and are you willing to actually pay it for what you're getting, are two different things here. I'm sure there are a lot of IndyCar fans that, if they wanted to, could reach in their pockets and drop $500 on this sport in one way or another. For general admission to a road course race, I don't think that's going to be one of those things.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, like, if you're rich enough, go to it, and it may be just like excluding people from going anyway. I think I'm not going to be surprised, building up on Emily's point, that we're not going to get that as many people attend thermal with the pricey tickets going up. So we're just hoping that some people watch it on their TVs, and that would increase the viewership a little bit. But we'll see as we head into the weekend if that makes a difference, being a point paying race or not. But I doubt the attendance will go up just because it's a points paying race. Moving on from the track scenario, we move on to a few drivers who are great contenders for a podium after we saw what happened in St. Petersburg. Scott Dixon and Joseph Newgarden are those two drivers looking for an opportunity to close the gap to Alex Palou, and they had a really strong race in Petersburg. And if Palou has early trouble, they could take the points lead at the end of the Thermal Club, which will be very, very impressive. And it's also everybody else outside the podium from last race weekend, as you were saying, Scott McLaughlin, Felix Rosenqvist. There's so many drivers that have done so well in the thermal before that could have a chance of sneaking the podium this weekend. And leading on to that point, Emily, who is on your short list to finish on the podium?
I goes without saying, Alex Palou. He's our last year's winner. He's our first race of the year winner. He's got his hunt on for another championship. He is going to be going out and doing what he does, which is just excelling at these, road courses and street courses. So certainly Alex Palou. I made the joke a couple of weeks ago following St. Pete that Scott Dixon, you cannot count him out. He could be starting at the Grand Prix of Long Beach and still find his way onto the hopefully improved, aesthetically looking podium here at Thermal this weekend. So certainly keep him in your mix. Scotty Mack as well. Scotty Mack, I feel like, is on the cusp of having a breakthrough season. I remember when we were all together talking about the Indianapolis 500, and it really felt like he was going to be having a huge moment in his career. And I feel like that could be this season as well. He really is figuring out these ovals. He's putting it all together. So he should absolutely be part of the conversation. And again, more practice, more driving to come later today by the time that we're filming this. But out of the initial first free practice, Andretti Global looking very strong. Kyle Kirkwood, Marcus Ericsson looking very strong in the initial practice. And a name that you're going to also hear throughout the season as well, Pato O'Ward, having a good top five. I believe top five, don't quote me on that. But I believe he was finished in the top five out of the first free practice. So a lot of drivers, again, we're going to be talking about another big four in another racing series between Andretti Global, Team Penske, Team Ganassi, and Team Aero McLaren. So keep those four teams in your purview, watching for a podium finish this weekend.
Yeah, I think the podium shortlist is probably what the podium looked like last time out in St. Pete. You've got to have Alex Palou on that list. Scott Dixon, always a threat, no matter where we are in this series. And Joseph Newgarden, of course, multi-time champion, multi-time Indy 500 winner. I don't know if the 500 experience is going to translate much this weekend, but point being, he's a very talented driver, has a very strong team underneath him, as does Scott McLaughlin, of course. And then, yeah, just continue going down the order from there. Again, we've only come here one time and under very different circumstances, so kind of hard to predict winner beyond your usual suspects like your Palous and Dixons and Newgardens of the world. But I think that, we could see a surprise. We could see business as usual this weekend. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think Palou is definitely on the short list, that's for sure. He's always looked good in the thermal club in the past as well. And with it being a different scenario, it's going to be hard to tell if they're going to take it more seriously or they're just going to take it easy a little bit. And we do know the competition is going to look very fierce and very competitive. And maybe, like you were saying, some surprises like we saw in St. Pete, Rinus VeeKay being one of them. He had a great race with Dale Coyne Racing, and we saw Alexander Rossi race with Ed Carpenter race for the first time, and he needed just one caution for his strategy to work, and then Armstrong ran very well, and so unfortunately there was a big contact with the wall, and that ended his race. So what could it be for Rossi and Armstrong? And there's quite a lot of teams that could fight for some really good surprising points. So, Ben, do you anticipate teams like ECR, Dale Coyne and Rahul Letterman to race up with the likes of the Big Four, McLaren, Penske, Ganassi and Andretti?
Well, I just pulled up the results from last year, and Rahul's a very interesting case. Obviously, we've talked about their struggles in Indy 500 qualifying the last couple of years, particularly Graham Rahal struggling to so much as avoid the last row shootout. But they got all three of their cars into the main event last year. Of course, there was that controversy with Pietro Fittipaldi getting disqualified, and Graham Rahal then had a mechanical issue. So only one of them, Christian Lundgaard, finished in ninth place, actually got to the finish line. But they all were fast enough to at least get there in the first place. So maybe there's something from last year that will translate for them this season. But looking at the rest of these results here, you had Canapino with Juncos advanced to the $1 million challenge here of his finale of the All-Star race as well. But Felix Rosenqvist kind of took that surprise podium with Meyer Shank. So, again, it is possible. But I think your usual suspects like, Alex Palou, of course, as you mentioned, just the winner of this event last year, Scott McLaughlin, I think would not be a surprise to see him standing on the podium again. I think those four teams, the top four teams in this series, I think are going to be where you're most likely to find your top finishers this weekend for sure.
And I would say probably throughout the season as well, right? Like I think we'll have pop-ups from these other teams. Felix Rosenqvist, he had like moments throughout the year. Of course, I got to see him take pole at Long Beach in person last year. So that moment is like ingrained in my mind that he is capable of producing an outcome like that, but he doesn't seem like he's able to put the whole weekend together. Christian Lundgaard was one of the higher performers at Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. Of course, now he's on Aero McLaren. The only person that I think that could make a out of nowhere campaign is Santino Ferrucci. I feel like he is someone that can always kind of put something together out of nowhere for AJ Foyt, especially whenever we go to the month of May in Indianapolis and ovals in general. But he seems like a wild card that I would never discount him. But zooming into this weekend, I think you're going to get, the usual suspects, as Ben mentioned, throughout the season. I think, again, the usual suspects, especially in this new charter system era that we're in. But I think we will have pop-ups of people having brilliant moments. But certainly this weekend, I think we can count on the teams that we've already mentioned to finish on the podium.
Yeah, I agree. But sorry, carry on.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to bring up Adam's comment here because I like what he says about Surfer's Paradise. If IndyCar wanted to do some sort of international exhibition or all-star event, I think that's the place to do it, not a rich and famous private club
Yes.
at Thermal. I think this is the atmosphere that fans would be wanting to see.
Yeah, I think we saw Denver suggest in the comments as well, something like Charlotte, Richmond, or Darlington, or even Adelaide as well, which I found quite interesting to say the least. I think an all-star race will be pretty good, maybe pre-season potentially, like we saw in NASCAR, but not to start the season, not for points, I think. But again, we'll have to wait and see, I think, because if they have a non-points paying race after the first race, and it'll just be an absolute nightmare. I like your suggestions in the chat, everyone. Keep them coming in, and you can keep an eye on IndyCar practice, which starts at 1 p.m. Eastern, the second practice, and then qualifying is at 5 p.m. Eastern today if you want to check out who will take the pole here at Thermal Club. But we now got to have a difficult choice of pick a winner, and it's over to you, Emily.
Yes, a very difficult choice. There's so much racing going on this weekend, and it's about to get going here soon. So we're going to just kick things off straight away with pick a winner, starting with F1. Ben, we're going to go to you first. Who are you picking?
All right. Well, this is my first pick a winner all year. I've kind of stayed out of the fantasy world when it comes to sports, trying to play these games here, but I got back into it with March Madness and the basketball brackets. My women's bracket is still perfect, by the way. I'm 16-0 after the first day.
Well done.
On ESPN's website, so I'm pretty pumped about that. So we'll see if that holds true here on the second half of round one games. Like I told you, Emily, last night, my men's bracket is completely shot already. I don't even want to talk about that. But let's talk about Formula One here and back to the world of motorsports. I don't know. I got to eat crow. I got to tell you, I did not expect Lewis Hamilton to win this early. I didn't expect Ferrari to win this early after what happened in Australia, but I thought for sure it would have, if it was going to be anybody, it was going to be the guy that has experience with the team, and Charles Leclerc. And Lewis, getting a little bit older, having to adapt to a new environment. I thought it was going to take him some time, but he certainly shut me up and a lot of haters as well. I don't know that he can win this main race, though, coming from fifth place. I think you're probably going to see a McLaren driver do it, and I guess I'm leaning towards Piastri. I feel like Lando Norris might lose some ground on the start here. He's still kind of working on that a little bit. I don't know. I think Piastri is going to be motivated after how Australia ended his home race in that heartbreak. I know he did get back up to claim a couple of points, but I think his motivation is going to carry him to the top step of the podium in the Chinese Grand Prix. That's going to be my pick.
Well, I think after sprint, we always thought it was going to be Lewis Hamilton that was going to be my pick a winner. But after we spoke about earlier, him struggling with his qualifying setup, Piastri has been looking so determined since the awful end to the Australian Grand Prix for him. He's motivated. He wants to get another victory. He wants to show to McLaren that he doesn't want to play second fiddle to Lando Norris all the time. He wants to show that he's capable of win. So I almost picked Oscar Piastri last time, but I'm gonna stick to my guns this weekend. I'm gonna go with Oscar Piastri to win in Shanghai. I really hope he does, and if he does not, then I'm gonna be annoyed that I jinxed myself.
Yeah, Oscar Piastri seems like a strong candidate. Again, in the spirit of anything is possible, George Russell seems to always kind of be like knocking on the door in right place, right time. So perhaps we have an upset there. Moving on to a different open wheel series. Ben, I'd like to go back to you. All of this discussion about the Thermal Club. Are you going to shock us and give us an unbelievable prediction, or how are you going for your pick a winner for IndyCar?
I think it's going to be all this discussion, all this talk for just another Alex Palou win. I think that's the safe pick. So I'm sorry to disappoint.
Shocking.
I don't know. I guess I could change my
easy point, maybe.
Easy point. Hey, I got to get on the leaderboard, like I said.
Same.
I don't know. I could change my F1 pick to like a Nico Hulkenberg or something like that for fun, but I don't know. I think at this point I should be trying to get as many points as I can here. I'm going to go with the safe pick and say Alex Palou.
I'm not doing very well in pick a winner. Every pick I've picked, I failed miserably. So I'm going to go and try and go for the easy 1 point, and I'm going to have to go with Alex Palou as well to get on the leaderboard. And again, if that doesn't happen, then I don't know what to think. But yeah, Alex Palou for me.
if Pelot doesn't finish in the first place, like boldly, not even on the podium in first place, I think there's a bigger like weird thing going on with our aura and our predictions than just you, Jess, because that seems like the most easy point to win this weekend. Of course, we want to encourage all of our viewers and fans to get in on the fun and also participate and pick a winner. So share with us who are you thinking are going to take home the top spots this weekend. Do you think that Ben is wrong in thinking that it's an easy point with Alex Pelot? Let us know. And passing it back to you, Ben, to wrap up our show.
The way this show's ending, it's probably going to be Devlin DeFrancesco or somebody like that. That'll be a real shocker. We'll just have to wait and see.
I also
but I
think it's easy.
Yeah, I think Pelot is certainly the top favorite, nonetheless. But again, races aren't run on paper, right? They're run on the racetrack, and we'll see tomorrow what happens over at the Thermal Club. But thank you all so much for tuning in to us this afternoon. Pleasure to be able to fill in for Joe. This is the last Saturday I'm going to be available for quite some time because I volunteer with Gordon's cross country and track and field teams, and we're rolling right into outdoor track season basically the next 5 or 6 weeks. We've got meets on Saturdays, so I'll be looking forward to that. But pleasure being with you all here today, and don't miss our wrap-up show tomorrow. We got a lot of racing we're going to be talking about this weekend, so and again, I'll be filling in for Joe on that, so stay tuned for that, and then I'll be back again Monday. I've got 4 shows in 4 days. It's going to be a marathon weekend here for me. But we'll bring you Grid Encore as always on Monday night with Brandon Crossland. And then Wednesday, Grid Tonight, we'll be back with Kobe, Josh, and Matt. So catch all your weekly motorsports news on that program. Thursday, our NASCAR weekend preview show will be back as well. And then Emily and I will be back on Friday for another episode of Women in Motorsports. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and bell icons so that you don't miss any of our new content or highlights from any of our programming. And as always, for one final time, a big shout out to our Patreon supporters, Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Thank you so much for your continued support of this channel. And again, if you liked what you saw this afternoon or tonight, this morning, wherever you are around the world watching us, if you want to consider joining them and supporting what we do here at the Grid Network, you can follow the link to our Patreon in the description box below. Or if you'd rather make a one-time contribution to us instead, you can tip us on Buy Me a Coffee or Buy Me a Baja Blast. Goodness knows I'm certainly going to need one this weekend with the Chinese Grand Prix start time and all the programming that I'm taking part in here this weekend. But in all seriousness, whatever amount you have to donate to us goes a long way in helping us improve our content. But as always, the biggest thing you can do is just follow us on all of our social media platforms at Grid Network TV, X/Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, whatever microblogging platform you're on these days. But we're also on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. You know where to find us. You see it right there on the screen. Just hit the subscribe button. It does a lot for us. We're well on the way now to 2,000 subscribers, and it's been a pleasure being part of this journey all the way through that. So thank you all again for tuning in. For Jess Ball, for Emily Sharp, I'm Ben Schneider. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the racing this weekend.